Adobe Stock ADBE is a ticker symbol, selling off a little bit today along with all other stocks towards the end of the day, but it's the earnings release that we got just a couple days ago that sent Adobe stock downward kind of sharply. Investors not too impressed. Analysts said still all in. My take, a little overvalued. I've got some charts I want to show you comparing Adobe stock ADBE symbol towards QQQ, which I broke that down just the other day, showing where the valuation for that should be. Adobe stock outperforms QQQ because the yield is much lower at this price point. So if investors are starting to take profits and selling off, Adobe stock might be a buy eventually. It's a great solid company, but overvalued at this point. Let's jump in and I'll show you the charts that I'm looking at. If you're just joining me for the first time, first and foremost, I am an economist. I break down the broader economy. I focus on the consumer. Our economy is 70+% driven by consumers and services. From there, I show how this will relate to the broader stock market and individual stocks like Adobe stock. ADBE, as you can see, dropped about 6% on the latest earnings. So what's going on is, and it says so here that revenue guidance wasn't as much as expected, but they believe some AI tailwinds, as the word was used, will continue to push forward. Nice thing about Adobe, and I like the company, I do, it's continually increasing revenues, but one of the things I like most about it is their product quality. You either use Adobe or you don't have enough money to use Adobe is kind of the thing. And that shows up in the revenue down below for, or top line for Adobe. Adobe is a quality product. I don't really do too much when it comes to this kind of graphic design or things like this. I'm okay with using the simple edits that I get out of my Apple iPhone and iPhotos. But for those who are in the industry, there is really no other option. And Adobe knows that. And they are in a little bit of hot water. Let's see how that plays out. In the meantime, you can see the small little drop that we saw from, is pretty much the last hour and a half of trading for today. I just did the stock market review in the previous, last night I covered the stock market review and I looked at what happened. It was an update for the stock market, then all of a sudden everything just sold off. People got antsy going into tomorrow's number, or which would be today's number. I'm recording this video late at night on Wednesday evening, but I won't get it up till Thursday morning. So the number expectations are that it could move the market. I'm doubtful. We'll find that out, of course, tomorrow morning. But given that, stocks sold off. All stocks sold off. The S&P 500 lost 1.5%. And as you can see, there's a small move lower. But it's really the move on the day for them that moved Adobe stock. ADBE took a hit pretty hard, about 6%. Investors sort of just kind of didn't really bite into it, but that one deal is kind of falling apart, and there was some sentiment moving back inward. I think Adobe stock might go a lot lower. We might see some moves much lower. It's overvalued, and I have that chart coming up, but let's break down the latest numbers. Again, Adobe, awesome product. You can see continuously increasing revenue. One of the key foundations for value investing, you want to be able to answer the question, what could you reasonably expect? And looking at this chart, moving into the future, assuming all else equal, we don't go into recession or anything like that, you can continue to expect we'll see increasing revenue on a quarterly basis. Assuming all else equals, assuming we do not see any kind of recession. But I am looking for something interesting to happen late 2024, going into 2025. Projected revenue, as you can see, 2024, $21.5 billion. This was a small downgrade from what analysts had been looking for. I think they were looking for 21.9. Now we see a range of 21.3 to 21.7. So averaging that to 21.5. Again, going into 2025, all else equals, looking for 24.1. Gross margins. if you take a real close look at this, it's slowly moving lower and lower and lower each quarter. Not stellar news, but not the end of the world, because we're talking about 30.33%, a third of a percent. Not a whole lot. Could easily turn around on that, but keep it in mind. Operating margins, of course, moving slightly lower, but starting to move back upward. If you look at the bottom, there was Q2 at 33.64%, then 33.95%, then we're back up to 34%. Can Adobe reach back up into 35 and 36? They would need revenue growth. They would need gross margins in order to get there. Nonetheless, this translates into a slowly receding net margin. Q3 bottoming at 26.34% for net margins, moving back up for the last quarter. Can they do it in 2024? Adobe stock, this is part of the reason why ADBE went downward a little bit. The margins aren't quite there. Investors got a little sketchy on it and sold off. Analysts are still saying all in. I'm saying still overvalued. Why would you buy into this when you have alternative investments that are less risky with better yield, relatively? And maybe towards the end of 2024, we do see some kind of recession. Therefore, your alternative investments turn out to be more risk adverse. Earnings per share continually increasing upward. Q4 323 was the earnings per quarter. 2024, you're looking at 17.93. This was a slight downgrade from what they were thinking previously. 2025, of course, $20.36. Here's where I start looking at it and I say, where's the juice? 51.82 price to earnings ratio. Why would you rush into this? It's already well above the average for the entire industry, including all of Nasdaq. Let's break this down. Price, $607.45. 2024 earnings per share projection, $17.93. Real quick math. Take that, divide it over top of the 607. 2.952% is your yield for owning this stock. Your risk? Well, we saw some selling today. The U.S. Treasury Yield, 3.9 at that one point. It dropped down to about 3.85 into 3.87 range. So if the Federal Reserve does lower interest rates, yields go higher, price goes up. If we do see a recession, revenues for Adobe go downward. ADBE stock, Adobe stock, goes down. There's a little too much risk. And when you're looking at the broader economy as well as the broader stock market, the risk is skewed against Adobe. Here is the look at the U.S. 10-year Treasury yield. We have seen it move off its highs. We're still waiting on a lot more information. I believe inflation will not hit 2% in 2024. I do not believe the Federal Reserve is going to be able to give back 3 of its raises in 2024. Given the information we have today, let's see how it plays out. But this is something I broke down just the other day. This is a look at, these are some of the Nasdaq 100. And I asked the question, and I just want to do a quick breakdown on this to give you an idea. If you bought the broader index, all the future earnings per share versus current stock prices, you're looking at a 4% yield, a little over 4%. Now, I did this, stocks have moved downward. So you might be able to get 4.25%, if not more, from buying QQQ stock. So when you compare that to Adobe, regardless of the fact that it is a stock that would be moving higher over the long term, there's a little more juice in the broader market. Give you an example. Here is Adobe Stock ADBE versus QQQ weekly chart going back a couple years. And as you can see, they often meet back upward when Adobe does come down, and simultaneously QQQ stock goes down. They meet up typically, which would mean Adobe stock has a little more to fall versus QQQ. QQQ, I believe, is appropriately priced, especially with the move lower today. Given that, there's a lot more juice in the tank. You're spread out over a lot more. Adobe, to me, too much risk. I won't touch this one. I am considering maybe selling some calls simply because the yield is too high and investors might get a little more jittery and start selling off Adobe stock. Make sure to hit that like and follow button. I break down stocks like this, the bigger name stocks, looking at them from a value investment perspective. But I first start with that economy. Hit that like and follow button. See you in the next video.